Joe Rogan has built his empire on one simple promise. He'll say what others won't. No scripts, no filters, no loyalty to party or politician. For years, that raw honesty earned him trust from millions who believed he could cut through the noise. And for a time, even Donald Trump slipped past Rogan's radar, a man who branded himself as the bold truth teller, the outsider fighting the system. But what happens when the loudest voice in podcasting realizes the so-called straight shooter is actually playing the oldest game in politics? It wasn't a small slip-up. It wasn't just one exaggeration. It was a pattern, layer upon layer of deception so brazen, even Rogan couldn't ignore it. In that moment, the myth of Trump as the fearless truth teller began to collapse. But what exactly made Joe Rogan stop and see the cracks? Before the confrontation, Joe Rogan's world was simple in its appeal. He was the unfiltered everyman, the comedian turned cultural referee, sitting in a dimly lit studio with guests from every corner of society. His power came from skepticism, his willingness to call out hypocrisy wherever he saw it. That raw, unpolished honesty made him feel like a friend at the table, someone who asked the questions regular people wanted answered. On the other side stood Donald Trump, a figure who defied the polished rules of politics. Loud, charismatic, and armed with one-liners, he projected himself as the anti-politician who told it like it was. To millions, including Rogan, this was refreshing, even electrifying. Trump seemed fearless, unconcerned with etiquette, and willing to say what others only whispered. It was a performance that worked. For a while, the illusion of Trump as a truth teller fit neatly into Rogan's own narrative. But illusions don't last forever. The seeds of doubt were already there, waiting for the moment when the facade would finally shatter. Donald Trump didn't just bend the truth, he reshaped it, molding reality into whatever suited him in the moment. He spoke with the confidence of a man who expected his words to be believed simply because he said them. And for years, millions did believe. When he boasted of record-breaking crowds that never existed, the pictures didn't matter. When he claimed he knew more than the generals, the fact checks didn't matter. His secret weapon wasn't accuracy. It was audacity. Every outrageous statement dominated headlines. He could invent a story in the morning, and by nightfall, the entire nation was repeating it, debating it, amplifying it. Lies became fuel, and chaos became strategy. He painted himself as the lone truth teller in a sea of corruption. Even as fact checkers logged thousands of falsehoods pouring from his rallies and interviews. To his supporters, this boldness felt like honesty. To skeptics, it was exhausting. A relentless barrage where debunking one lie only made space for the next. Trump had mastered the art of overwhelming the truth until people stopped trying to keep up. It was this power, this ability to charm, and confuse at once that made him such a dangerous villain in Rogan's unfolding story. Joe Rogan had never been shy about giving controversial figures airtime. To him, conversation was the ultimate test. If someone's ideas were strong, they could withstand questions. For a time, Trump fit that mold. Rogan spoke about him like an odd character in American politics, a man who broke rules but entertained millions. He wasn't endorsing, but he wasn't condemning either. In Rogan's world, Trump was simply another voice in the endless cultural debate. But cracks began to form. The more Rogan listened, the more he replayed Trump's words, the more something felt off. The no-filter persona started to look less like brutal honesty and more like stagecraft. The slogans were repeated, the exaggerations too wild, the contradictions too obvious. Rogan, a man who prided himself on sniffing out fakery, could sense it. The authenticity didn't add up. It was subtle at first, a raised eyebrow here, a skeptical chuckle there. Yet his audience noticed. Rogan was beginning to question the very foundation of Trump's image. Was this really truth-telling or just the slickest performance of them all? For someone who built his reputation on honesty above all else, the moment of confrontation was inevitable. Something in Rogan refused to let the mask go unchallenged. When Trump spoke, it was with the cadence of a showman. His phrases were short, sharp, designed to stick. The best ever. Everybody knows it. Believe me, It didn't matter if the claim had no anchor in reality. The delivery was hypnotic, a hammer pounding the same point until it echoed in people's heads. His supporters heard confidence. His critics heard chaos. But for years, the slogans worked. Rogan, by contrast, thrived in the long form. He slowed things down, picked apart statements, asked the questions nobody else seemed willing to. Where Trump delivered certainty, Rogan introduced doubt. Where Trump flooded the airwaves with spectacle, Rogan dissected the performance itself, pointing to the places where facts had been twisted beyond recognition. His tone wasn't polished or rehearsed. It was casual, blunt, the way people talk when they're trying to figure out what's real. This clash was more than a difference in style. It was a duel for the audience's trust. Trump leaned on charisma, demanding belief through sheer force of will. Rogan leaned on skepticism, offering listeners the relief of someone willing to say, wait, that doesn't make sense. Each word became a sparring match between myth-making and truth-seeking, and in this battle, every jab landed harder. Every contradiction exposed pushed the tension higher. Which voice would the public trust, the salesman or the skeptic? The moment of rupture came not through rumor or vague impressions, but through receipts, cold, undeniable evidence. Rogan, who had always kept a cautious distance from partisan hysteria, began watching the clips side by side. Trump claiming he never said something, then the footage of him saying it word for word. Trump insisting the pandemic was under control, followed by a mountain of casualties. Promises of walls nearly finished, paired with reports showing stretches of empty desert. It wasn't just political spin. It was contradiction piled on contradiction, delivered with a straight face. For Rogan, a man who prides himself on sniffing out dishonesty, the sheer volume became impossible to ignore. Each clip was a crack in the facade, and the cracks multiplied until the image of Trump as the fearless truth-teller collapsed under its own weight. What struck Rogan most wasn't the lies themselves. Politicians lie. Everyone knows that. It was the audacity, the deliberate rewriting of reality as if facts were irrelevant. That to Rogan was different. It wasn't just bending the truth, it was weaponizing it. The realization carried the sting of betrayal. The man who had sold himself as brutally honest was in fact the slickest performer of them all. And once Rogan saw it, he couldn't unsee it. Joe Rogan's strength has never been flowery rhetoric. It's blunt honesty, the kind that cuts through the noise. And when he finally turned that honesty toward Trump, the effect was devastating. Rogan didn't couch it in political jargon or bury it in caveats. He said plainly what millions had suspected. Trump lies, and he lies often. Coming from Rogan, a voice admired for cutting through spin. The words landed like a gut punch. He began pointing to the contradictions, mocking the recycled slogans, laughing at the absurdity of the exaggerations. It's all performance, Rogan said, his tone half incredulous, half amused. By stripping away Trump's veneer of authenticity, Rogan used the very weapon Trump claimed to own. Plain speech. The irony was sharp. The so-called straight shooter being unmasked by someone even straighter. For Rogan's listeners, it was vindication. They didn't need flowcharts or fact-check spreadsheets. They had Rogan cutting the act down to size in real time. And for Trump, who thrived on controlling narratives, it was a rare and dangerous challenge. Because when a cultural figure like Rogan calls you out, the performance no longer feels invincible. In that moment, the balance shifted. The self-proclaimed truth-teller had been exposed as the pretender, and the audience felt the power of seeing through the act. It was more than just a critique. It was a collision of legacies. On one side stood Donald Trump, a man who had built a political empire out of spectacle, commanding a cult of personality where loyalty often outweighed logic. On the other side was Joe Rogan, whose empire rested on the opposite foundation: authenticity, the promise that he would say what he believed even if it angered half the country. The clash reverberated far beyond a single podcast. Trump's defenders erupted, dismissing Rogan as a sellout, accusing him of joining the establishment. To them, Trump remained untouchable, the hero who fought for them against a hostile world. But Rogan's listeners heard something else. A line finally drawn. For once, someone who had entertained Trump's persona was refusing to bow to it. This wasn't just political commentary. It was cultural theater, the kind that forces people to pick sides. Trump's voice thundered with bravado, but Rogan's rebuttal landed with a different kind of force. The quiet power of truth delivered without apology. And as audiences watched the duel unfold, one question lingered in the air like smoke after battle. Had Joe Rogan just pierced the armor of Donald Trump's image, or had he stepped into a war that no one can truly win? When the dust settled, the fallout was unmistakable. For Trump, the cost was more than